Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss some very interesting poll results which give a picture of how well Labour's campaigning has held up against the Conservatives. Little hint, despite the best efforts of their client media and the amplification of culture wars, the Tories have not been able to drown out Labour's efforts. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, the day of the crucial local elections has arrived. Also, Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. So I'm going to be popping down to the polling station later on with my photo ID, of course. But these are the ones I've been waiting 2 years for, and I've been saying it for the longest time. There are three reasons why these local elections are by far and away the most important in terms of gauging Labour's progress. First of all, when Keir Starmer became Labour leader, he said he was aiming to have the party ready for a general election in 2023. Probably not getting it in 2023, but it means that he had planned to get everything in place for now. So there can be no excuses if their campaign machine isn't firing on all cylinders. Secondly, these local elections include some very important target areas for the general election itself. You know, there are not only some key battlegrounds in the Red Wall, but in some areas where Labour need to beat the Conservatives in more traditionally marginal territory. You know, local elections, they're never a great fit for the national voting intention because they're never for the whole country. That's why you have different local elections each year. But this year's includes a number of barometer constituencies. And the third reason is that we now have in place the Tory leader who will be fighting that general election. This is the first proper head-to-head. I said from the start, I saw no way that Boris Johnson would still be leading the Tories into the general election. I said it as far back as the end of 2019. He'd just got this huge election win. I didn't care. He wasn't going to last a whole term. He lasted a lot longer than I thought he would, but that was, you know, because there was no one credible to take over. But he was always going to be deposed. You know, I've said so many times, Labour needed to get him gone as quickly as possible in order to maximise the time they had to work on the successor. Last thing we wanted was for Johnson to go 6 months before the election, successor come in, get a honeymoon period, bosh. That's not going to happen now. And this is the time. These are the first local elections with the two candidates for Prime Minister after the general election take place. Board is set, the pieces are moving, if you'll pardon the Nick's quote. So the first poll to look at from Redfield and Wilton, well, this is the one I'm going to be looking for these. This is the head-to-head between Starmer and Sunak on policy areas. Now, I talked last week about how this same poll had Starmer nudging ahead of Sunak for the first time on the economy. Labour have been ahead of the Conservatives on the economy for some time. That's important, but it's also fairly useful to have the party leader ahead as well. So on these polls, Starmer just nudged ahead last week, or the week before this poll at any rate, because this poll is now a few days old. And he was beating Rishi Sunak on 15 of the 17 markers. Now Starmer is 7 points ahead of Sunak on the economy and is beating him on 16 of the 17 markers. Then on the question as to whether a Labour government would take the right measures to address the cost of living crisis, big jump up. A week earlier, 36% said yes. This week it's 45%, massive leap. Now ordinarily, you would be suspicious of such a large shift from 1 week to the next. But in this case, it could easily be credible. Labour have been pushing the cost of living and some of the things that they would do to address it very hard in their campaign. They've been talking about these are the problems, this is what we would do about it. You know, and the Conservatives, on the other hand, have been steering well clear of the subject. Labour have been talking about their policy of house building and helping people be able to afford to get onto the housing ladder. The Conservatives, oh no, we don't talk about houses. Labour have been talking about, you know, taxing the wealthy more so that they can pay for things that people need, like doctors, teachers and so on. No, we don't talk about that. So the Tories haven't wanted to talk about any of this, but Labour have been tackling these issues. You know, the Tories instead have tried to distract people with their political fun and games. So this might actually be a sign that Labour are getting their campaigning right, that they are using the issues that voters care about. And more importantly, it's proving more effective to target the issues voters care about than the Conservatives' efforts to change what the voters most care about. And that's an ominous sign for the Tories, with an eye on the much more important general election next year. Because if they do the same thing in the same way, they might expect the same result. Could also be that perhaps people are responding to polls outside election campaign times, because they're hypothetical, they're not thinking about it as much. Maybe when there's an actual election on, people get more serious about the choice. Maybe it focuses them a bit more. And I don't want to jump to conclusions based off one poll, but what a change in a week. I've said many times in the past, the issue with things like voting intention for most of the time, there isn't an active campaign on. Campaigns do change public attitudes. If they didn't, political parties wouldn't save up a war chest in advance to pay for them. The Conservatives recently dismissed a load of staff, including cleaners and security at their party headquarters, in order to spend as much as possible on this local election campaign. That's how important it is to them. They have squeezed they've been struggling with donations a little bit, and they've been squeezing every penny to try and spend the maximum amount on this campaign because it matters. So campaigns work, and what we can see from this poll, it's not proof, but it's a bloody big indicator, it has worked in Labour's favour. Look at the differences. As an extra little bonus, they also show Keir Starmer gaining 5 points on approval rating. Now, Sunak also gains a point, but it puts Starmer on an approval rating of +10 and Sunak on -5. So Starmer 15 points ahead of Sunak, and even though he was already ahead, he gained 5 points this last week compared to Sunak gaining 1, indicating again that the campaign has worked not just more in Labour's favour, but in Starmer's favour as well. That's what you can read into it. Both Starmer and Sunak have used their campaigns successfully to boost their image in a way, because both of them gained, but Starmer got much more value. Another bad sign for the Tories and a good one for Labour. Although I think I'd better finish by pointing something important out. In relation to the local elections, I'm referring to polls here which are, of course, of more use for the national picture. These polls were not intended to reflect the views of people voting today and would still be of limited value even if they were. They are essentially polls comparing Labour and the Conservatives in a head-to-head. In local elections, voters often have more choice. And it's only ever part of the UK which takes part in any given year. Besides, we also don't know the impact of needing photo ID. So why I find these polls exciting, it's not because of what it might mean for the local elections, but because it appears to show that Labour are able to campaign more effectively than the Conservatives, because that was a big question mark for me. I am aware that in the general election, the Conservatives will have Isaac Levidow, someone who actually knows how to campaign, in charge of their strategy. Whereas for these local elections, they've had Greg Hands, whose main campaign shtick has been to say, Labour did this joke note 30 years ago. Yeah, good one. But it was still a big question mark for me. Can Labour stand toe-to-toe with the Conservatives when it comes to the campaign? I could understand how Labour would build up a lead over the Conservatives, but will they be able to maintain it during the heat of a general election campaign? This isn't conclusive, but it suggests that Labour can stand toe-to-toe with them, meaning that as long as Labour go into the general election campaign with a healthy lead, there's no real reason why they shouldn't be able to maintain it right up until polling day. In fact, on the evidence of this, they may even extend it. That's probably not going to happen. That is assuming, of course, that the voter suppression issues have been sorted out by then, or that if not, they ironically hurt the Tories more than Labour. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.